Hey everyone, welcome back. So in the last video, what we have seen that we have optimized our test cases or our page objects where we have, if I open my page objects, that is under src and pages. So in this register page, earlier we had here multiple awaits and all. Later what we did, we created one util and we have optimized our test case. So all the multiple awaits whatever we are having in this util command utility, and our page class we made it look much cleaner and more readable. So that's what we have done in the last video. Now I had a plan to create a video on Allure Report to see how we can generate Allure Report and then how to attach a screenshot, but due to some issue in the system I'm not able to, so maybe I'll be creating that video in future. But for now, today what we are going to see is that we'll be seeing one end-to-end scenario where what we do, we'll do some actions in the UI application or web-based application, get the data, then you need to make an API call, and once then you compare your UI data with API response what you're getting. So for that I have chosen this application where normally what happens, assume this just as a normal some kind of search form where what you do, we have this input box, we just give an input something, click on the button and then you get a result here. In our case we are going to validate, we'll just enter this URL, we'll click on this AJAX request button and then we retrieve this text. Now this is nothing but an API. So when you hit this request as a get call in your Postman, you'll get this kind of response. So that is why I have chosen this website, that I can make a API call uh, and get the data in this particular format, and plus I can use the same API for the Postman request as well. So this again will be normally like just UI actions, entering data, clicking on button, retrieving the text. So this will be a UI action, and then we'll make a API call for this API again, and for that we'll be using supertest library. There are many libraries available for Java or TypeScript related base, but for now in this video we'll be looking for the supertest library that we have one npm module, and this will help us to hit any API, get the response and then validate it, right? So this is what n supertest is. If you can check in npm JS site, you can search here supertest and you'll get the data, how to install it, how to use it. Now that is what we are going to see here. For that I have already created a sample feature file with the name E2E user feature, where what we are going to validate is, I'll open the page URL, and that page URL is nothing but resttest.com. that is the same, this page. Okay, so I'll open the page, then I'll perform endpoint search. When I'm saying endpoint search, nothing but I'll just enter the data here and I'll click, that will be a search, performing search. Now we need to pass this data. Okay, so that data I am passing from here, but again if you notice, this is not the complete URL which we are passing here. So what I am going to do, I'm going to maintain this base URL in some other file, only the endpoint, later endpoint will maintain here, or we'll pass it from the feature file. Okay, so we'll perform a search, then we'll make a API call. So this will be a UI search, then I'll make a API call, and then I'll validate both response. Right now this is just an endpoint, a basic URL, the base URL whatever we have. I have created one config folder under src, config folder, and I have created one file called API config. For now we can put everything here itself, but as your test grows you tend to use that, make it reusable. Plus if you want to change your environment runtime, you should always keep your base URL in one place, so that you don't have to modify your test when environment changes. So those things you should be able to handle from one place. That is why it's good practice to keep any base URL in one file, or one variable, and then reuse it wherever is required. So now in this I have created one export const variable base URL, and I'm just using this base URL here, and endpoint will be passed from the feature file, right? This is very similar to whatever we have seen earlier videos also for register features. If you see register feature, we have done something similar. We are opening the URL, then we are validating, we are entering some data, and then we do validation. Similarly here We'll just open the URL, we'll perform search, we'll make a API call, we'll validate it. Now this is new here to make a API call, right? But all these parts are still very same as we do. And I have also created a page class element. So to work with this element, I need the text box element. Then to click on this button, I need the text allocator for this. To capture this message, I need a locator, and then capture this message also I need a locator. For all this, I have already created a locator just to save time, and the related functions also. So now what this function is doing, opening the URL, enter API URL. That means nothing but it will set text something in this area. Then it will click on the ajax this request button. After that, it will get the status text. That means nothing but this text, and then get output text. This will do nothing but it will get the text from here. So I've already created, and this is nothing but new. Whatever we have seen in the previous video, the same thing is repeated here. Only thing new you can see here, I'm returning some value. So when I'm saying get text, it should return me the text of that value, right? Whatever I'm doing get text, and the return type will be always. Now anything you do in async, right, that is a promise. So you cannot write directly a return type as a string. You need to say promise string. So this is it. These are the basic functions that whatever we have seen in the previous video, very similar to that. Now I'm just using these functions we have created in our step definition. Now for all this feature file, whatever I have already generated a step, and I have already created a feature file as well, a step definition as well. So it will open a URL, enter that data. Now when I am saying enter API URL, which is entering something here, so endpoint from where I'm getting the feature file, that is this endpoint, right? This will be passed as a parameter. This parameter will be coming here in this value, and then I'll pass. But I need to enter the complete URL, not the only. So what I'm doing, I'm reading that from configuration file, which you have already seen under config API config file, right? So in my step definition, I'm just importing it. Now if you remember my last video, I've explained whenever you create anything like export and const. For example, if I'll show in utils we have created, right, export, const, and some function. Okay, so if you import such kind of function, it will come in the curly braces, same as for base URIs also, which I have kept here now. Base URI, that will come in the curly brace, and then you can directly import it. So I'm appending base URL plus endpoint. That means this URL and plus endpoint, which is this. So once you append it, right, it will be the complete URL. So it will enter the URL, it will click on the search button. Now wherever I have a step for make API call, I have kept on hold. I'll show you how to do it because that is new. So I want to show you step by step. The next part is I'll just retrieve the text, store the value variable, and then just print it. Similarly, I'll get the output text. That means I'm getting this text and this text, and I'll try to print in console. First, let's see whatever I have written here is working or not. Once we are able to retrieve the UI elements, then we will see how we can make an API call, and then how you can validate against those data. So let's check this one first. Now I need to run only this E2E feature file. I don't want to run all the feature files. So what I'll do, I'll just give the name in configuration. So if in configuration, if you run as of now the command npm test, which we are doing from the very beginning, it will run all the feature file. I don't want to run all the feature file. So to update, come to WDIO config.ts file, spec section, and you just need to define the particular your feature file name. So I'm saying E2E feature. Now it will run only this feature file. Okay. One more thing I want to change here in configuration, because once you see the console, there will be a lot of logs coming in the console here. It will be very difficult to verify whatever we are printing here, right? Console. So it will be very difficult. So what I'll do, there is a section called log level. It is information. Now I'll make it to error. So if any error comes only, it will log. Otherwise, unnecessary logs I don't want to see here as of now. Maybe in your requirement, if you want to print all the logs, you can just change it. But for now, for better visibility in the console, only whatever printing to show, we'll just change it to error. Fine. Now let's run this. Now to run, we already know the command is either we can say npm run test or we can say npm test. Both is fine. So let's run this and see what we are getting. So as of now, we have not done any API related configurations. All we did is just a basic feature file creation, step definition, page class, related page class, and the step definition for that. Okay, and we are just trying to see whether we are able to retrieve this URL, like open this URL, enter the data, click on button, and if you are able to retrieve this data or not. That's what we're going to see. Okay, so it's loading the URL, entering the data, clicking on button, and getting that response. Fine. So execution is completed, and let's see whether we have given this status from UI and response from UI. That means did we are we able to retrieve these values or not in the console. So let's check in the console, and if you look closely here, status from UI HTTP 200 success. That means whatever we are getting here, we are able to retrieve. Response from UI, and then this is the response. This is nothing but same data. So whatever we have written here code is working fine just to perform UI operation, right? And as of now, for making API call, we have not done anything. So let's do that now. What we will do, first thing, to make any API call, there are different libraries available, and as I told in the beginning, in this video we are going to see only for supertest. Now to install, first things you need to install the supertest. To install it, you just need to run this command. So all you need to do is just go to your console, in your project folder, make sure you are in project folder and click and run this npm install supertest -f save and -dev. Okay, and this will install the library. So let's install it. Meanwhile, until this installation is happening, we'll just have a quick look what is the example is given in their npm.js website. So you can import like this supertest. Then this is just to create a request, but how to get the request is that you need to say with the variable you are creating, you need to say pass the base URL, and then you need to say get, and you need to pass the endpoint, and then you can do the assertion. Now this all example it is given here, that is using callback function, where we'll be using async and await. So that will be slightly different, but yeah, similar to this only. Request base URL, then dot get and endpoint. And if you have any authentication, sorry, any headers or anything, you can use set, and then you can pass all the headers like this. Set, if you want to pass set content type, you can say set content type and application JSON, and then you can do validation with expect 200 is equal to, sorry, content type should be JSON. So these are the assertion. Now we'll do this in a async and await fashion, that we'll see. I hope the installation is done. Yeah, so if you see, installation is done, and if you go to package.json, right, you will be able to see, where is that supertest, right, is installed. Now one more thing we need to install is, when you are installing supertest, you need to install one more TypeScript related type. To have a better type support, you need to install one more supertest TypeScript. Okay, so you need to say @types / supertest and then save dev. Install this as well. So install @type supertest and then supertest. I have already done this, so it is already here. So you just run this command, and I'll paste this, keep this command in description of the video as well, so you can just run this. Fine. So once we have this installed, now let's come back in our step definition and start writing the code. Now first things will be, you need to import it. So let's import supertest. So you need to say import supertest from, and then just type it super. It should suggest you, auto suggestion should be there. Okay, if you are not getting auto suggestion, that means there is something wrong. So make sure you're installing this both package.json, sorry, dependency, type supertest and supertest, this both dependency you are downloading. So once you're done, once you imported, it is giving error. You can give any name again here, just for keeping making sure that I'm using supertest, I'm giving the same name, but you can give any name here. Now what you have to do, we need to pass the base URL in our supertest. So we can simply say request. You can give anything, but this is what generally is been followed, that we give the name as a request, and you have to say supertest, and inside a bracket you need to pass the base URL. right? Now base URL we are already reading in from the configuration file API config, which we have created right here, which we have already imported. So let's just pass in this bracket, right? And we are getting some error here. So let's see what it says. That normally this kind of import from supertest will not allow, so it is suggesting you to add this in here for the TypeScript default import. So just copy this esModuleInterop and go to your tsconfig file. You have a tsconfig file, just add inside compiler option itself. So I'll add enter, sorry, I need to add in double quote, comma, sorry, colon, and make it true. By default it will be false, so make it true and make sure you have a comma. So just add this, and then if you come back here, the error should go away. See, the error is gone now, right? Now this is the variable which holds the which we are passing already the base URL. Now just come back. Now where is our step? This is our step to make API call. So let's use this and we'll say request. So with this request, now we'll be able to make call. So just use this type request, and if you said, then you say dot, and auto suggest you all the basic whatever we have inside this function. So if you see, it is suggesting get, or if it is not suggesting, just type here and you'll get auto suggestion after typing few words. So I'll select this get. Now using this only we need to make a get call. Now make sure what kind of call you are making for your API. For in our scenario now, whatever API is required for that, a get call is enough. We'll make a get call to this API, and then we'll get this response. So I'm just saying API.get. Now you need to pass the URL. Now to pass the URL, see endpoint in this step also I'm reading from this place itself, which will pass in the variable, right? So that means in our step definition, this endpoint we are already getting. So let's pass. Okay. Now whenever you are making call, because base URL you're already passing here, you don't have to pass again complete. Here you just need to pass the endpoint only, and make sure this is, you add await because you'll be using async mode here, right? Async, and then you can store this in a variable. So let me say this as a const response. Now this will hold your response. So I'll say this as a response. Now this will have the response of API. Now first things what we need to do before going for the validations and all, let's see, try to print it just to make sure that the response we are able to capture from the API call. API response, I'll say API response call, and let's see, not sorry, console.log. So what we are doing now, we'll print itself and make sure that whatever we are getting is printing correctly, and after that we'll do the assertion, or we'll see how we can make. But first we need to make sure if you are making this get call with this endpoint and the base URL which we have defined in this, right, is correct or not. So let's see if you are getting this print. So let's rerun our test again. Npm test. Let's rerun our test again and see that whether we are able to get the API response or not. Okay, so it looks very simple, right? What we did, first we need to import the supertest like this, import supertest from supertest. Now it will give you error because you need to add some model in your tsconfig. Now in tsconfig you need to say esModule. So this is auto suggestion, it came when it was giving error, so I have just added it and I added true. Now I have worked in supertest, that is why I know, but yeah, it was suggesting as well. So just add this, okay, in tsconfig file. Now once you added that, after that what we did, we with this supertest we are passing a URL, base URL, and then storing that in a request. That will become our request. Now using this request we can call get or post or anything. We have post as well, or we have other API calls operation as well available. For now whatever we need, just get call. So I'm saying get, passing the endpoint, storing that in a response variable. You can name this as per your convenience, but yeah, normally we do that. For request we say request, and for response we just store as a response, and then you're just trying to print whether it's printing correctly or not. Okay, so we have got something. Okay, now if you see here, whatever we were printing is correct, but there are a lot of console here, and if you see here, so many console has come. Now we were not expecting this is something different which we were not expecting. But let's see if you are able to, if this makes any sense. See, this is something like API response call only we are trying to print here, right? API response call, and we have given variable name, and then but here it's not the expected. There are so many data is coming, and we are not sure what is this. But reason, because we have printed complete response. But when we are making any call, API call, whatever you get response, that will be hold in one body. So you need just print response dot body. You see there's an auto suggestion here happening. So once you say body, it will print only this body. Okay, not everything, but whatever you are getting in body response. Okay, and if you don't understand, you can just, I'll copy this URL. We are trying to hit this URL, right? So let's just paste this URL in browser and see what we are getting. Whatever we are getting is will be a body, right? This is the body that we should get a response. Okay, and the same thing we will be getting. So now as we have updated our code to say response.body, let's see if it is printing only body or not, and not every details. Okay, so execution completed, right? And let's check our console.log again now. So yeah, we see here API response call, which we are giving here, right? API response call as in console, and then the value. And if you see here, this is what we were expecting, right? In from API call, because this is what will, when you hit this URL, right? When you hit this URL in Postman, you'll get the same response. And if you compare this, right? See, data ID to email, first name, last name, avatar, support, URL text. Data inside that ID, email, first name, last name, avatar, and then inside support, URL text. So we are able to make API call with this supertest request.get, passing the endpoint. We are able to get the response, and then we are able to print. Now we should not just print it, but we need to assert the data. What our end goal is now, that perform a UI search, make a API call, and then validate both of the data, whether whatever you are getting in the API and what you are getting in the UI is matching or not. Okay, so let's do that validation. Now just to do this, as of now, this body is stored here itself, right, inside this, but we need to assert here in this step. So what I'll do, I'll create here one variable, let API underscore response, and I'll make this as any type. Okay, and this, now what we will do now, let it be there. In this variable we'll store the body of this response. Okay, so now this variable will hold the response of body, response from the API call which you are making, right? So it will hold. Let's get the status code as well. So we will say, we'll create one more variable called API API status code. And how you'll get the status code? With this response, there is a function. If you just say type and just type status, see, it is, you can print a status type, you can get a status code, and many more things. But let's just print get a status code as well. Now this class level variable we have to create on the top. So I'll say let, and we'll make this as a type of any. This n is nothing but we are defining types from the beginning of the videos, where we are saying string or number. But if you are not sure what kind of response you will get, you can always assign that as a any type. So we are just making this as a any type here. Now this two will be, this two we are storing, getting from the API response, storing that in a class level variable. Now you will use it in this block, in next block, to validate it. Now one thing you need to notice, whatever you are getting from API call is a JSON response. Okay, but whatever you are getting from the UI, that when you are saying get text, that you will get as a string, not a JSON. So when you are trying to compare JSON and string, obviously it's going to fail. Okay, because we are saying get text of this UI element, right? We are doing get text. That means you are storing as a string. Even this also we are storing as a string, right? So we cannot compare this directly. Now just to make the comparison, what we are going to do, let's change this or parse this in a JSON format. So if you want to parse any string in JSON, or in a simple way in JavaScript or TypeScript, we can simply say JSON dot parse and pass your string. So now whatever you parse here, right, that will become JSON. Okay, now as of now, if you see here how this is printing API response call proper in JSON format, right? But a response from UI, how it is printing in just one liner like normal string. Now next time when we run, just notice the difference. Okay, so anyway, we are converted that as a we have parsed that as a JSON. Now what we are doing, we have one more variable, that is okay, this is just for status only. Okay, actually this status, right, get a status, is what we are getting is this one, http 200. We don't need to convert this to JSON and all. This is just one liner. We need to convert only for this. For that, so we have done the change in the wrong place. We need to change it here. We just need to convert the response text from the UI to JSON. That means only this text we need to convert to JSON, not this one. This is a plain string. We can compare the string. This one we need to convert to the JSON. So saying JSON dot parse, inside that we are passing our string. Now let's do some comparison. So now let's write expect what I'm saying, status code I'm already getting from the UI. This is getting from the UI, right? That means nothing but we are getting http 200 success. So let's say http 200 dot success dot, now if we say 2 equal and whatever we are getting in API status code in this variable, if you say here, now this is going to fail because you are expecting http 200 success equal to 200, which is not. When you say status code, right, it will return you only the status code number, either 200 or 400 bad requests or whatever. But in UI we are getting complete this. So what we will do the assertion whether this message contains 200 or not. So for that, instead of 2 equal, we'll say 2 contain. There's a assertion available to do 2 contain. So I'll say expect this UI response status should have 200 as the status code. Okay, let's do another assertion as well. Now we are just asserting as of now status. Now let's assert body as well. Okay, so now whatever we have UI response in a JSON format, okay, where we have typed here dot to, and we'll say equal, and equal to what, API response. Now both should pass because first one is an API response and second one also we are passing as a API response only. So let's run this and see whether our assertion is working fine or not. Now just note it here, the first API call is in JSON format, whereas from whatever we are getting in from the UI is normal string. It's not a JSON format. Now we have done this JSON formatting, and let's see next run how it prints. So I'll just rerun again our test. Okay, so execution is completed, our test passed, and let's check what happened. Last time we have seen that API call was in this JSON format and our UI was in not proper format, but after changing this to JSON parse, it is coming properly in a JSON format, and even assertion whatever we have done is working fine, means it is passing. Now just to make sure that this is doing correctly, what I'll do, I'll just give this incorrect some data response. Okay, so now with UI response whatever we are making, now we are I'll not valid, okay, now let's just make it fail to a status code only. So whatever we are getting in UI status, let's just validate with some random like 500. We are saying validate this value http 200 success code contains 500 or not. Now this is a wrong data, so it should obviously fail. If it fails, that means it is catching the error correctly and whatever code we have written is working fine. So let's just make sure it's failing as well for a wrong value, or if something gone wrong or something goes wrong, it should catch it. So let's wait for the execution. Okay, execution completed, and this time as expected it failed, and even assertion is saying accepted value file 500, but we have received HTTPS 200 success code. That means whatever we were validating, we were expecting some wrong data, passing wrong data, and we are expecting to pass, but as we have code is working correctly, if something is wrong it is catching that error. So we are good with this. Now let's quickly recap what we have done. We have taken a sample website where we perform some UI actions, assuming that you have some search application or search page in your working application where you enter some data, you click on search, or we are entering here URL and we are clicking on button, then you get some response. I'm getting this response, retrieving this response, and then I make a API call and validate against that data. For that, we have written a feature file. We have maintained our user URL endpoint in this feature file. Then we have maintained our base URL in one separate file for the API. So I have created a config folder inside under src and created a file with API config. Now we are going to maintain all API related configuration in this file only. So that is why I have created this file. After that, we have used all the locators we have maintained in our user.page class as a best practice that we should be doing. So we have done that, and then we are calling that all these functions whatever we have created in page class here, and we are performing the UI operations. Also we made a call, I make a get API call, so we are making with supertest. So what we did, we installed supertest, and that is in package.json. So we have installed the supertest and the TypeScript types also of the supertest. We have installed two dependency, and using that dependency or package npm package we have imported. Then with that import we have passed the base URL in that and stored in the const variable, request variable. Now using that request we made a get call, passing the endpoint is coming from the feature file, that is this endpoint, right? So passing the endpoint we store that variable in response. Now we need to say it away because we are making async call. Okay, so we have stored that in response variable. Now what we did, using that response we are getting a body, we are getting a status storing in a class level variable which we have created here. Reason because we need to validate these data in next step. So now here we are getting the data from the UI, and whatever we are getting from the UI status code validating with whether that is part of in the API or not. UI response with API response. Now suppose for now we are what we are doing, we are comparing the complete data from whatever we are getting here in the UI and complete API also. Now say that I don't want to compare complete my API. Okay, I want to only compare that whether inside data and in this email is coming in UI and API both place same or not. How we can navigate and then go through inside data and get the email ID properly. So let's just add one such validation here. Okay, so what I'll do, expect. Okay, now UI status response.data.email to equal, and then API response. Inside API response we need to go inside data. That means inside API response that data, so dot data, inside data we have email ID, so we need to say dot email ID. So with a dot we can navigate API response dot data dot email, that is API response dot data, inside that dot email. Now let's see if this is working fine or not. Okay, and let's remove this consoles now. Okay, we don't need to keep this multiple consoles, so let's delete these. Okay, we have deleted, and just to make sure that whatever we are getting here, let's just show you in the console also whether we are correctly printing the console data or not. So for that also I'll just keep console.log for now just to show. So API email, sorry, this from UI will get email and we'll store that here, and let's store print API email as well. So I'll say here API email and this one. So we are just printing as well as asserting also. Let me format this document, formatted. Now let's run this. So let's quick recap again. We are validating, so we are making API calls here, which I have already explained. Then in this step, whatever we are getting from the text UI, comparing that UI with API status code, comparing complete response with API response, and then not only just complete body, inside body also whatever we have some particular attribute, that also can validate. So that also we are trying to validate one email from API and UI, whatever we are getting should be equal. Now let's run this and see if this works. Okay, assertion completed, and you see test case pass, and we have added console. So let's see if both console, and if you see here UI email this and API email, that means from UI we are getting this, from API call we are getting this, and both are correct. We are able to get correct data from the API and UI both. We are able to print, we are able to assert, and everything is working fine. So with this, we have successfully integrated our UI test framework with API. We are able to make API get call, and we are able to get the body, we are able to get the status code, and we are able to assert with whatever in the UI. So that's it for this video. In next video we'll try to make a post call. We'll see how we to deal with post call, how we can pass some pass the parameter, or sorry, payload as a body and different headers, and then we can make a call. So that we'll see in the next video. Thank you very much.